Hello, hello. Happy Tuesday, everyone. It is Rochelle with Artful Leadership Coaching and Consulting, and I want to welcome you to the last Artful Leader interview of the year. Um, this has been an amazing year where I've had an opportunity to speak with over 30 artful leaders who are doing amazing work really at the intersection of the arts, education, healing, and social justice. And it's been a wonderful way to really listen to their stories and tap into their wisdom and their tools and their practices so that those of us that are working in this field can really do this sustainably, can do this with heart, can do this really in a way that truly impacts young people and helps us to, my mission is to really help folks do this in a way that is sustainable, that we can have longevity in this field because we give a lot of ourselves, and it's so important to be grounded in this work. And I am so excited about our guest today. Phoenix, also known as Sun Park, who is the founder of Voice of Purpose. And I had an opportunity to see her speak at the National Guild for Community Arts Educators groundwork gathering this fall, which was a really beautiful kind of 3 week virtual gathering to replace their annual conference that really focused on how do we center healing and transformation in our field. And it was so neat to see Phoenix speak and to hear her share a little bit about her framework that she's using with this purpose rooted community arts education. And as I was listening, I was like, that's my tribe, and just said, I want to talk to her. And so, Phoenix, thank you so much for saying yes and for joining us today. I would love for you to just to introduce yourself and share a little bit about how you came to be a leader in community arts education and really developing this pedagogy around rooting in purpose in this work.
Yeah, thank you, Rochelle. Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here. And we were just saying offline, like just love nerding out about this stuff. So any opportunity we get to just connect as people in the field who are, as you said, moving towards social justice and community buildings through art creation and education and healing. I think these are components that are really key to not just things that make our sector special, but I feel like things that can enrich everybody's lives,
Yeah.
when we can really connect in with who we are and our creative energies and, the healing work is really key to how we're moving forward if we do care about creating a better world, right?
Yeah.
And that was shout outs to Groundwork and the National Guild for it and Ivy and Jasmine and all the folks, Ashley, who have put that on because I think it's really important for us to think about how we are approaching ourselves as key components of the work that we are doing and not just looking at the systems that are around us
Yeah.
and critiquing and we do need to critique and build, but the building has to first start with us as the basic building blocks of everything that we're creating. So, hello, I'm Phoenix, everybody. Hi. I am founder of Voice of Purpose and been building and doing this work in community arts for about 16 years. A lot of my work based in Toronto. And really, I think there's something really important about these intersections of art and community, right? And the the personal development side of things, I think, has to remain core. The big thing at Voice Purpose for us is embodiment. Embody your purpose, right? That's kind of our call to the world and to ourselves, right? Like that is a standard we hold ourselves accountable internally as a team, is that we're here to be the fullness of who we are as individuals that are living souls on this planet. right? And there's an alignment that we need to achieve internally in order to make a meaningful impact in the world. And that's what we're coming together to do. There's the mission of equipping artists and arts educators and organizers, administrators, and people who are just in the community arts field to deepen in their purpose and deepen in their impact through embodying their purpose. But as we're moving toward that mission, we have to do that internal work. So on a personal level, having been on that journey for so long, the pathway to purpose is about coming into the alignment of the truth of who you are.
Yeah.
And in order for us to do that in the present day reality, you know, I was actually speaking with a colleague last night and thinking about Grace Lee Boggs. She had a question: what time do you think it is on the clock of the world, you know, for humanity? And I really think that we are at this place where we're on the cusp of this new paradigm, a new shift that's coming in, and it's already started, but we're still in like the foothills part of this much larger transformation that is coming in. And those of us who are on the front lines of this work, it's a really exciting time because we get to build the frameworks, we get to build the new frameworks, we get to build the new paradigms, we get to build a new way of being, a new way of culture, right? A new way of understanding that culture is created and it is something that we engage with either unconsciously or intentionally, and we have a choice in that if we become aware that we have that choice. So what culture are we building? What culture are we perpetuating? What culture are we participating in? And what is the imprint that we are walking as? My two favorite words right now is embodiment and imprint. And I see, you know, just like how we understand and see sacred geometry and patterns, right? I see humans in our archetypes in a similar kind of way. Like there's different snowflakes of us, there's different archetypes of us, there's different imprints of us, there's different imprints of trauma, there's different imprints of history, of culture, of language, of thought, of ways of thinking and being and behaving and speaking and all of that stuff. I see those as imprints. And we have the ability to change our imprints, you know, even down to the DNA level, if we're going to get technical about it. But what is the new imprint? What is the imprint that we want to be? Because the thing about imprints is that they get passed on. So I'm carrying imprints of my family lineage, of my cultural lineage, of my, you know, all of the things that get passed out from my ancestors and the things that I've absorbed in my time on earth, right? Those have all, I'm carrying those imprints with me. And I think in the act of healing is how we can alchemize that process. We engage in a process of alchemy through healing to change those imprints, especially those imprints that are coming from trauma or coming from generations of systemic oppression. That how we clear that out, it's not actually like the policies and procedures and the language and the statements and all of the solidarity, all that stuff, and using certain words and not using certain words and all of that stuff is part of the process, but it actually doesn't change the imprint. Right. It provides us a way to intellectualize the process, but it doesn't actually bring us into the process. The process itself is much more intimate. Yeah. It's not intellectual, it's very intimate. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think healing is absolutely the way forward for decolonizing work, for social justice work, for any movement of folks who feel a calling to like change the world. It's like, we need to heal, you know, and we need to build supportive systems and structures to support that healing. Yeah. We need to address the systems of thinking, but also like the pedagogies that we're working with, if we're going to get like really zeroed in on like the people that we're speaking to, is there's for artists and for educators and community facilitators, we have ways of engaging, right? In the classroom, in the spaces that we're facilitating, whether or not you are intentionally creating a pedagogical framework, um, like you are bringing in a design to the space. It's just happening.
Yeah.
So let's be more intentional about how we're framing the conversations, how we're holding the space, you know, all of that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. So just that.
I think
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this is so powerful what you're talking about because we really are the vessel of change, right? And so when we are coming into a space, whether we're interacting with young people or colleagues or community members or whoever it is, how we show up is at the core of whatever the results become. And so, like you said, if we are carrying a whole bunch of those imprints you were describing from, trauma, from oppression, from, whatever it is that we're carrying into this space really impacts the effect that we have on others in that space. And yeah,
mm-hmm.
we could use all the right language and we could say all the right things and do, but if we are not showing up as energetically whole and healed and grounded, our young people know that.
Oh yeah, and they absorb it. And so this is
Yep.
what I'm saying is that your imprints will call out my imprints that are matched to your imprints that you are embodying in that moment. So if I have an imprint that is perhaps triggered when it encounters a certain imprint that you bring to the table, because I have an experience with that imprint that you're bringing
Yep.
in a previous experience. I'm bringing now when we remain in the unconscious space, we bring the pattern,
Yep.
the pattern that we're used to. So, I mean, I guess to make it a bit more like down to earth and practical, there's like, so you've heard of co-regulation. It's this understanding that we as humans, we have these bodies that respond and absorb energy, right? And the simplest way of showing an example of this would be like a mother to a baby, right?
Yeah.
And this term is used a lot in like mothering, right? It's like you have this ability to co-regulate with your child, where the emotions that you are holding in that moment is felt, you know, through that connection. So if you are anxious, your child is going to pick up anxiety, right? If you're calm, your child has an opportunity to regulate to your state. So it's not just true for mothers and children, it's a human thing, right? So when you are in a space with somebody who, you know, has a lot of anxiety or is going through an intense emotional process, we are impacted by that. We feel that we're empathic, especially those of us who are quite empathic, we pick up on those things. So it's just understanding that that is a thing that is happening in the ether all the time.
Yeah.
And when you enter the space with young people, when you enter the space with community, when you enter a space with folks who you are facilitating, understanding that, especially in that position as a facilitator, you're in a position of power.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's archetypes that play out in that interaction as well. So when we are self-regulated, when we are regulated and self-aware of what's happening internally, then we have the choice to show up how we want to show up, you know, and really where the current kind of conversation in our sector is that it's really important for us to show up in our authenticity.
Yeah.
It's really important for us to show up as humans, real people, present and grounded, and authentic, right? There to build meaningful in a supportive environment. But if we're not, haven't done our own work before we get there, it's hard to hold that space in that way. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
mhm.
So, what do you think are some of the things that occur in our fields when folks do not do this work? Like, what kinds of challenges or problems occur that maybe our listeners can be like, oh, that's what that is. I mean, I have some thoughts about that, but I'd love to hear from you.
Well, can you give me an example and I
Yeah.
can live? Yeah.
Yeah, well, for instance, I'm thinking about like teaching artists who go into a space and they wonder why students won't show them respect, even though they do all these quote unquote right practices, or they have like discipline challenges with young people, or um, they're just not seeing the kinds of engagement or results that they want to see. Or within teams of people, there's like a professionalism or a superficial way of engaging that becomes a barrier for people to really dive deeply into the work, because there's these there's all those rules that we have about like this is how I should show up as a professional. But when you're doing artistic work, your heart and your soul is out there. And if you can't engage vulnerably with other people and name what's happening for yourself, and name, like a lot of the organizations that I work with, like just learning how to ask your colleague, hey, we had this interaction in a team meeting and that really upset me. And can we talk to one another about this? Just little things like that, or knowing how to handle these challenges or these bumps in the road. And when we don't have a handle on our own regulation, we don't have a deep sense of the healing that we have done and what we still get to do, where that's why we're often not reaching those outcomes that we keep saying. We've got these outcomes that we want to have this impact. We wonder, why am I not having this outcome or these impacts? And we focus so much on programming and not on becoming and embodying, right? And that's one of the reasons why I loved so much of what I heard you share at the guild. So does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much there. Okay. Because, okay, this whole I have to leave my emotions at the door equals definition of professionalism is a really colonial concept. I'm sorry. No. It's like leave your humanity at the door and turn into an organic machine. And that is the definition of professionalism in a lot of spaces that are still carrying the imprint of the colonial kind of way of engaging human interaction.
Yeah.
Right? It's transactional,
Yeah.
right? It's not relational. It's not rooted in honoring your emotions, right?
Yeah.
So if you're having the example of a student in the classroom who is not behaving, right, or is acting out or is not engaged or whatever, that is an emotional response. The child is having an emotional response to the environment that they're in. They're having an emotional response to the curriculum or the demand that is on them in the moment, and it doesn't jive with them for some reason, right? That's what's emotionally happening for the child. As the teacher, it's really important for you to understand why that child is having that kind of response to the material that you're presenting. Is it relevant for them? Is it something that they care about? Is it something that makes them feel like they're the rules around how they're supposed to engage? Does it make them feel trapped? Does it make them feel like they don't have agency in what they're being asked to do? Do they feel interested in it? Right? Does it matter to them? So on a technical, like curricular level, that's number one. Number two, there's a human in the room who is having an emotional response. So are you able to engage with that person, that human, that child, that student, in a way where you are equals in the level of humanity, right? And a lot of times in the very kind of, you know, oppressive, like way, you know, the colonial way kind of legacy of doing things is that you have your authority. I am the teacher. You have to listen to me. I am your superior. And why do you have to do it? Because I said so. Right? That does not bring you on the level of humanity to that person in the room.
Yeah.
Be able to want to engage in the material with you. Right? Yeah. And then also at the same time, oh gosh, there was so much in what you said. So rewind a little bit. What did you say at the very end? You were referring to that situation, and then you said something else
about like how folks interact with one another.
Oh, like, yeah, so that applies to the workplace. Yeah, because so once you decide that you are okay to engage emotionally, and jokes on us because we can't actually stop that from happening. Right. You can pretend the emotions aren't happening, and then you can respond in like passive aggressive ways or things like this, which, you know, like we can try to be organic machines, but we're not, right? We're humans, and so if that child is behaving a certain way that you don't like, are you aware of your own emotions and how that makes you feel as the teacher? And are you able to put that in check to be a support to that human? And also, if you're in a work environment where, you know, a colleague or coworker has said something or has done something to upset you, do you have the courage and the maturity to have a conversation with that human about how that made you feel, right? What this implicated for you, or, you know, how that has impacted, you know, not in a blaming way, in a way like you did this and da da da. It's like, you know, it's about communication. It's about helping one another understand each other. Yeah. So that because the hope is in that conversation is that there's compassion happening from both sides, right? So it comes down to, again, like that work on the personal level, and maybe I will share a little bit of the framework so that people can understand why this is so core. Is that the personal aspect is so it's building block number one. Yeah. And you need to build from the personal to the systemic to the integration and creation, right, of how we're moving through the world. So I'm gonna just remember, this is actually, oops, the slideshow that I had thing. Oh.
Yeah, take your time.
I may actually just show, hold on before I do that. So what I'm going to be showing you all is Voice of Purpose's kind of approach to transformative community arts education. And when we're talking about transformative community arts education, we're talking about the ways that we can utilize the arts as a way to engage in deeper social understanding and social impact, right? And I'm just going to show 2 slides. Share screen. Can you guys see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of like building block. The first layer of how we work out Voice of Purpose is understanding that there are core elements of purpose. And it's really important for us to engage with the individual level and the personal level and understanding things on a systemic level, and also coming to the place of integration. So the systemic is about the social, the cultural, the historical context of what we're working with. And the personal level is, that those individual experiences, like how are we doing that self-regulation? How are we doing the work internally? And when we can bring those two spaces of understanding into a place of integration, we have an opportunity to have healing. We have an opportunity to have a new way of being. And when we've done that work, we can move into creation. And when we can move into creation from this place, it can be so much more meaningful, and because we're speaking with arts educators, so when we're in the classroom and when we're working within the space of community arts, this is our core pedagogy that we work with, which is purpose-rooted arts education. And it's really diving into each one of those 4 core elements of purpose, right? And maybe actually I'll back up a little bit just to say, in this conversation about transforming community arts education, when you're aligned in your purpose, you're better equipped and have greater access and greater capacity to impact social change. Like, this is the reason why we're kind of having this conversation. For the listeners that maybe weren't part of the conversation earlier, the framework that we're working with is really about embodying your purpose and deepening your impact through the embodiment of purpose. Like, this is how we make impact in the classroom, right? In the community centers, in our organizations, in the field, right? And when we're doing this work, because oftentimes people are like, well, what is purpose and how do you find purpose? These are the core elements of purpose that we need to actually really connect with to do this greater work. And in the spaces of these 4 kind of elements, in the personal level, we have to understand our own identity and authenticity and walk in that space of the intersections of who we are, right? And as we're moving into the space of the systemic, right now it's understanding what is equity, what is inclusion, how do we actually do this work? But really it's about, it's about the embodiment work that happens at the healing and well-being level of the integration. Because once you put those 2 things together, is the intersections of my identity and then the historical, systemic, cultural context, you're gonna unveil that you need to do some healing. We all need to do some healing because we've grown up in this system where oppression has been kind of filtered through all of our systems. And when we're engaging in creativity or in the space of creation, that we're engaging that with creativity and technique and innovation. So striving for excellence, not in a colonial sense, but in the sense that we are becoming the fullness of ourselves, right? So I don't want to go too deep into it. There's one thing that I do want to show you. If you guys are really interested, you can go watch the rewind of the Guild's presentation. Here it is. This is the one I wanted to show you. So and if folks are actually wanting to connect more with the other things, you can go voiceofpurpose.org. There's actually in the about section, there's a walkthrough of the framework. So it'll actually give you a bit more probably than what I'm showing you here for folks who want to do a little bit more digging. But this is really what I wanted you to see, is that in the journey of transformation, because if we're like, okay, here's some helpful frameworks and here's ways that we can engage in the classroom, and I understand that I need to do some healing, and I understand that I need to engage more authentically, and I understand that we need to have equity. Like, I get all of that. Like, this is not news, right? I think a lot of us do know that, okay, this is the path forward, but how the heck do we get there? And I think this is the major question that is facing all of us right now as an entire sector and as individuals and professionals in the space. We're all collectively asking the question of, like, how the heck do we get there? And it, like I was saying in the beginning about, what time are we on the clock of the world? It's like, we're on this cusp, we're in the foothills of this mountain, of this new transformation that's coming, right? And that we are a part of, and it's really exciting to do that. But how do we actually get there? And I think these are really core kind of stepping stones of helping us to understand the journey that we are on right now, right? Is that there's 4 stages of exploring, engaging, embodying, and activating. So in the explore stage, you are just kind of understanding what's out here. What's the lay of the land? What's the context? What's the history? What does it mean to be culturally relevant? What does it mean to, be anti-oppressive, or, to be an ally? Like, what are these things? So it's like, this is where a lot of the languaging, all the languaging happens at the explore stage, in my opinion. It's about us conceptually getting a sense for what is the thing that we're here to do, what is the thing that we're dealing with, and how do we conceptualize a path forward. Right? That's what we're doing in the explore stage. In the engage stage is when we are starting to take a little more action centered around the things that we uncovered during the explore stage. So in the engagement stage, we have a lot of like do's and don'ts. We have kind of like rules and regulations of how to engage social justice, right? You use this word, you don't use that word. You say this, you do a land acknowledgement, you use BIPOC or IPOC instead of BIPOC. You have to stand back in spaces where you want to be an ally. So there's these kinds of like ways that we do things. But sometimes when the transformation isn't happening on a deeper level for that person or for that organization on an internal level, they become performative checklists.
Right.
They become things that you can do to honor the recommendations of the language and the concepts. But if you haven't progressed to the stage of embodiment, those do's and don'ts are just performative. They don't mean anything. Right? Because the imprint hasn't changed. It's at the embodiment stage where the actual work is happening, where we are becoming the change, as opposed to walking in the image of change or speaking in the language of change, but we've become the change. And when we've become the change, it's through the healing work that we become the change, because at that point in time, the imprint, what you are changes. And the language and the actions will naturally unfold from that change. Yes, we can have those guidances, and those guidances are important because it helps us to be strategic. Right? But it's not even just about the speaking or the doing, it's the becoming. And so when we've done the work of that intimate healing work, that intimate personal encountering with your own internalized oppressions, with your own internalized trauma, with your own internalized patterns of the patriarchy, colonialism, racism, all of that stuff, right? And we've healed the wounds around that, regardless of where you land on the spectrum, there's harm that's been done, right? And by these systems overall for everybody, right? And in different ways. And that's the intricacy part, that's the intersectionality part, because we're not all harmed in the same way, but we all are harmed in some way, right? And so when we've been able to purge out the patterns, the internalized behavioral, mental, emotional patterns and habits, because emotions can be habits too. All of those things, when we've been able to purge that out of our system, and not just outwardly through the things we do or don't do, but because we've done the healing work around that, then we'll really be in a position to be in activation, because when we have that new imprint, it's activating, like you have greater capacity to now activate that new imprint in others. and in spaces by being it. And that's when, because mind you, that fourth circle is really about creation. Now we are creators, where we are really working with the alchemy of the universe, right? If I can say that, like, come on. We are changing what we are in the universe on a cellular and an infinite level. We can then have the capacity, because we have harnessed it, to replicate it, to shine it out into the world, and be a new model for how we human, right? I think that's really it. We have to become the new model of human. And yeah, so I think that's really it. Yeah, and I guess I can just show this last slide. It's just like, what are we striving to embody? You know, who are we striving to be in the world, and how do we get there? So yeah.
Yeah, and as you were sharing all of that, I mean, I love the clarity of those steps. And I think that it's really important to remember that it's kind of a spiral process, right? That healing isn't a destination where it's like, oh, I'm going to have arrived at this point and I'm going to be all perfect and brand new. Like, I think about my own fundamentalist sort of background, of being born again or something like that. Like, there isn't this moment where you're perfect and now you can go do the work. We're in a spiral sort of process with these different phases, right? Of like exploring, engaging, integrating, and then and how, we don't have to be perfect to show up and do the work, but it is a way of being that we adopt, and we're constantly going, oh yes, here's a moment where I get to remember that it's time to heal and step back, or just acknowledge and have that language around that, right? And because I think when we talk about healing, I think a lot of times folks get afraid, like, wow, that means I'm gonna have to do so much work before I can like do what I do.
No, we heal along the way. It's
That's
never good. It's not like, oh, I am now healed. Yay.
right.
It
That's
doesn't
what
happen like that. It's a spiral process. Like, once you have healed a layer of yourself, of an aspect of a pattern or something, there's always more. Oh my gosh, there's always more. It will never end. And that's a good thing. And that's why we came here, right? Like, we came here to transmute, at least, like, I don't know. I feel like I believe in, like, there's the existence of like soul groups. And my friend was the person who kind of talked to me about this concept. Is like, you have soul groups, and we kind of incarnate on Earth, in batches. And and I've always said that there's like this fabric, there's like soul fabric. I feel like you and I would probably belong to the same soul fabric. I feel a lot of people in our sector would belong to the same soul fabric, because archetypally we're sharing a mission, right? Like, and you can brand it as this or that or whatnot, but it's really that we're here to create change through art, through engaging with community, through engaging with education, through utilizing art as a tool for change, art as a tool for development and growth, right?
Yeah.
And there are particular kind of like tools that are really good for us to have, and and what I was saying is that it's good for us to have those tools, but it's also good to understand that, like, we came here to do that transformational work.
Yeah.
So it's not like you just do the one transformational work and then you're done. It's we came here to do transformational work, so that's what we're going to do with our lives.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think something that I'm finding a lot in the work that I'm doing is that in the process of all of these stages that you're talking about, something that arises often is conflict. there's often conflict, right? It's that, like, we think like, oh, I've got this beautiful curriculum and this wonderful activity and I'm going to go in, these kids are going to love it. And then you go in the room and we have this conflict where they're like, nah, I'm not really feeling that. Or we have this conflict where they're, dealing with some other thing. Or in the process of, like, the teams that I'm supporting right now, like, they have conflicts within each other because they're various communication styles clash, or they have different things that they're trying to accomplish, or they're operating within these really tight, scarce kind of frameworks. And the thing that I am learning so much about is that, like you said, we're called to this transformation, and that means that every time there is a conflict, it's actually a place for our relationships to deepen. And it's a
Mm.
place that's kind of an indicator of, like, hey, this is a place where we get to heal. In
Mhm.
this moment right here, where you had that moment where you got really pissed at your colleague, or they really hurt your feelings, or this kid, like, you really didn't know how to handle their emotional needs in that situation, it's
Mhm.
just an indicator of, like, hey, we get to step deeper into healing here. We get to step deeper into love and connection and holding one another high. You know what I mean? And that's something that I'm sitting with a lot, and I'm curious if that's something that comes up for you and your team, when you're working with organizations with this framework you've created.
Yeah, I think there's a base level of truth that conflict is the breeding ground for growth. Like
Yeah.
it is the place where growth happens. It's in the space of discomfort and conflict as a definition, I think. Or, it could lead to greater conflict, which could potentially have greater lessons in store if you choose to engage it that way. So I think it's always having that mind frame also that conflict isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
Conflict is an opportunity for growth, and it's an opportunity for us to exercise our courage and
Yeah.
our compassion and our patience and our understanding. It's an opportunity for us to learn something new, potentially from a perspective that is quite different from ours, but there's always something to learn in that situation. Um, and I think, when we're able to do that, it's again like being able to assess the situation. Because if you're just triggered and you're just going off, then you're in your survival mechanism. You're in your fight or flight stage, and in that state, you can't learn, right? So I think there's the base level of like, yeah, get to that place where you can approach conflict not from, just the raw biological response of, yeah, like your triggers going off. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Your reptilian brain response, your survival response, which is to fight, flight, or flee, or fight, flight, or freeze. And
Yeah.
sometimes just play dead if it's really bad. But so yeah, so there's that. And I think in the space of conflict, again, it's really an opportunity for us to exercise our courage and our vulnerability and authenticity and model.
Yeah.
If it's a young person, it's an opportunity to model how to have healthy conversations about conflict, about because conflict will never not be. There will always be conflict. In the best of relationships, you'll still have conflict over something, at some point. And knowing that conflict is a space for us to grow, finding strategies of how to engage that space is really useful. I would say for young people, first, it's like, I guess, regardless of the age of the person, it's helping to help that person feel heard. Most of the time in conflicts is one side or both sides don't feel like they're heard or that their opinion is being considered or being respected. And I think that piece is really important because until you get over that hump, you'll be on a loop of people just kind of saying the same things over and over. And people say things over and over because they don't feel heard,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, or they shut down, because they don't feel heard or they don't feel like they will be heard.
Or
right?
the behavior
Um,
communicates for them.
yeah, so it's
Yeah.
first making sure that the person that you're in conflict with knows and feels that you genuinely feel like what they have to say matters. Their opinion is important, even if you don't agree with it, right? And especially for young people, that's huge coming from an adult. It can feel, if it's genuine, very validating to be like, hey, I know you were just acting out and doing all sorts of crazy things in the class, and you probably know you were going a little bit wild too, but like, what's going on? Like, um, and and helping them feel safe, right? People will say nasty things or do nasty things when they don't feel safe, when they feel like they have to somehow protect and guard. That's a defense mechanism, right?
Yeah.
So creating spaces of safety, creating spaces of vulnerability, creating spaces of courage and authenticity by, again, being the model of that, showing up as that, right? Not demanding it of them for you,
Yeah.
right? But if you do want that from them for yourself, you have to first model that and walk in as that. And um, that takes work. Because when you're triggered and things are going on, like shit goes out the window, unless you can have the internal balance to recognize internally. That's where the self-awareness comes, like, oh, okay, I feel this, I'm feeling triggered, I'm feeling this, or, like,
Yeah.
so I don't know if I answered your question, but I think conflict is core to our development as humans. And also in the space of purpose. I think that our greatest purpose in life, or our purposes in life, come from the spaces of our greatest pains and our greatest tragedies, in life, the greatest hurts that you've experienced, and all of the deep work. If we're talking about trauma, like, I really do feel the places where we've suffered the most in life hold the lessons or the path forward in our purpose, because in that experience of that deep suffering and pain, that experience equips you with tools that you would not have had you not gone through that, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it gives you the tools to be able to move forward, and it gives you the tools to potentially help other people as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. Really beautifully said. I think so often the reason why we want to change the world, right? When you were saying like we're of that same soul fabric, we're these folks that want to imagine a new world, and that's because we're seeing a world full of conflict. We're seeing a world that is so hurt, and where we have been so harmed, and the people we love have been harmed, and we want to change that. And so there's a gift in that, right?
absolutely.
So one of the things that I like to do at the end of these conversations, I feel like we could talk forever because we're just like having this wonderful conversation and touching on things that I feel like are so at the heart of the work and us being effective practitioners in our field. But I love to just hear from you as an artful leader. What are your practices when it comes to, your own healing and your own well-being and fostering your own sense of purpose?
Well, I think it's a commitment to, first and foremost, to be in alignment with myself, to connect with my internal place of anchor, which ultimately is God, and not God in a religious kind of doctrine kind of way, but understanding God as the embodiment of all. Like, I am creation. I am part of all, and I feel that, um, you know, in many different ways. I think deeply when I'm in meditation. I feel that physiologically also, there's a sense of knowing that I am in the alignment of my purpose because I choose to walk forth in the path that I can feel calling from inside of me. And the day-to-day, I guess, knowing of that internally is an anchor for me. It's a deep faith, I think, of in myself and in the reason why I'm here and the work that I'm doing. But that faith only comes because I feel aligned with the truth of who I am and the work that I am doing, in like an earnest way. And I think in terms of things that I do, I do have a daily meditation practice, where I go through the sequences of the Divine Mother Healing, which is a technique that was developed by Connie Huebner, and I learned from her daughter Elizabeth. Actually, I was in a course where they taught it together. But it's a whole sequence of healing sequences and tools to clear your different energy centers and connecting with the different planes of energy, and connecting with the divine. So that's a daily practice that I have in the mornings. But I also, have engaged with plant medicines, which I feel like are really important. The earth holds technologies that are here for us. And a lot of indigenous traditions that hold this wisdom. And I think there's something really powerful about engaging with the like the tools of the earth, especially the healing tools that we have, and I've also engaged in a lot of therapy and all of that stuff, but I think first and foremost, regardless of whether you want to work with different medicines or work with different techniques or develop different daily practices, I think that's all very important. But I think first and foremost, it is really about the commitment to yourself. And I think I had to grow to that place. I had to grow to that place where I could commit to myself. Because there was a point in my life where I really didn't like who I was. I didn't like myself. There was a lot of like self-deprecating and self-hate and all of that stuff that was going on because of my traumas.
Yeah.
But once I was able to engage in enough work where I reached a certain level of critical mass, not to say like I'm a healed human being and I have no issues, right? Like that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying I did enough of the work to a point where I was able to clear that energy that held me back from really loving myself, and so that commitment comes from that place of deep love for myself and for creator, and all that is, because it's so beautiful. And so I think it's really that, I think we came to that place at the end of the conversation with the guild as well, where we're like, we need to integrate spirituality into our daily walk. Like we are part of all. And I think we've learned how to divorce ourselves from our sacredness. And that's a big part of the problem that goes unspoken. We've forgotten the sacredness of these vessels that we're in, that we are like magical beings. It's magical. Earth is magical, guys. Like how, but anyway, I know we're at the end of our time. I just want to say thank you so much, Rochelle, for inviting me to this talk and to share with your folks. And I think, the last thing I would like to say is like, it's worth it. Like it's worth it to do the work. Like it's hard and it's scary and it's terrifying. It takes everything. It takes the whole thing. Yeah. But it's so worth it. And so yeah, I guess I just want to throw that out too. It's just double down.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for just sharing your experience and your deep, deep thinking and feeling into this and your framework that I'm sure took a lot of time and effort to kind of clarify and And I hope for, the listener, you who are here still with us listening, that this was a nourishing conversation for you. And I think, especially at the end of the year, it's really a time where we're often kind of going like, taking stock of like what we created over the year and what got in the way and what helped. And I think really grounding into healing and grounding into our purpose is just like the way through. And so thank you so much for bringing that voice of that into this space and for the work that you do with Voice of Purpose. And I hope we can stay connected, whether that's just energetically as soul fabric sisters or in the world in some way in our field. It was really a pleasure to talk with you, and I wish you happy holidays, whatever it is that you do to celebrate. Have a beautiful day.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.